Sophia's hand trembled as she scrawled her dead mother's name on the napkin and placed it before the billionaire whose company had poisoned their town. She never expected that this final, desperate act of defiance would ignite a corporate war that would strip him of his empire and transform her from a struggling waitress into the most powerful whistleblower in America. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The fluorescent lights of Bellini's flickered overhead, casting an unnatural glow across the white tablecloths that made them seem almost blue. Sophia Reyes adjusted her bow tie for the third time that evening, the starched collar of her uniform shirt digging into her neck. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of Manhattan's elite, investment bankers celebrating deals, old money discussing inheritance taxes, and tech moguls negotiating acquisitions over $500 bottles of wine. 6 months into this job, and Sophia still felt like an imposter among them. A 26-year-old community college dropout with an eviction notice taped to her apartment door and a stack of overdue medical bills that grew taller by the day. But tonight, those problems felt distant as she focused on not spilling red wine on anyone wearing clothing worth more than her entire wardrobe. Table 14 needs attention, Marcus, the floor manager, muttered as he passed. VIP, Harrison Thorne. Sophia's stomach tightened. Everyone knew that name. Harrison Thorne, billionaire CEO of Thorne Industries, whose face graced the cover of Forbes last month. The man who had revolutionized clean energy technology while simultaneously being labeled the Wolf of Wall Street for the climate change era for his ruthless business practices. "Why me?" she whispered, but Marcus had already disappeared into the kitchen. Taking a deep breath, Sophia approached table 14, tucked away in the corner with the best view of the city skyline. Harrison Thorne sat alone, staring out at the glittering lights of New York. He wasn't what she expected. In his mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and deep lines etched around his eyes, he looked more like a contemplative professor than a corporate titan. The only hint of his wealth was the immaculate tailoring of his navy suit and the subtle gleam of his platinum watch, catching the candlelight. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Bellini's," Sophia said, her practiced smile in place. "May I start you with something from the bar?" Harrison Thorne turned to her. His eyes, startlingly blue and sharper than she anticipated, assessed her with clinical precision. "Macallan 25, neat." "Excellent choice." Sophia nodded and turned to leave. "Wait," his voice was quiet but commanding. "You're new." It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. 6 months, sir." His gaze returned to the window. "That will be all." Throughout the evening, Sophia tended to Harrison Thorne with professional detachment. He ordered minimally, a simple steak, barely touched, and seemed more interested in his whiskey and the view than the food. He never once looked at his phone, unusual for the type of clientele Bellini's attracted. He just sat, watching the city as if searching for something in its gleaming towers. As midnight approached, the restaurant emptied, leaving Harrison Thorne as the last remaining patron. Sophia had begun to wonder if he'd forgotten she existed when he finally signaled for the check. "Was everything satisfactory, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, placing the leather folio on the table. He nodded once, not looking at her. "It was fine." She was turning to leave when he spoke again. "You have a degree in environmental science." Sophia froze. "Excuse me?" "Unfinished. Columbia University. You dropped out 3 years ago." Now he looked at her, those penetrating eyes seeking confirmation. A chill ran down her spine. "How could you possibly know that? Your name tag says Sophia R. You have calluses on your fingers, consistent with someone who spends time in laboratories or fieldwork. You quoted Rachel Carson under your breath when you thought I wasn't listening as you cleared the appetizer plate. It wasn't a difficult conclusion." Sophia stood speechless, clutching her serving tray to her chest like a shield. "Why did you leave?" he asked. "I don't think that's any of your business, sir." The words came out sharper than she intended. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Fair enough." He slid his credit card into the folio without checking the amount. "Have a good evening, Sophia R.I." She should have walked away, should have processed his payment and forgotten about the odd interaction. Instead, something reckless seized her. Perhaps the knowledge of the eviction notice, or the memory of her mother's hospital room, or simply the arrogance of this man who thought he could read her life story from a name tag and calloused hands. "You know what?" Sophia said, placing the folio back on the table. "You want to know why I left Colombia? Because while I was studying how to save the world, my mother was dying of cancer caused by chemical runoff from one of your subsidiary company's factories in New Jersey." Harrison Thorne went still, his hand hovering over his whiskey glass. "Riverside Chemical Processing," Sophia continued, her voice low and steady. "You acquired it in 2015. By 2017, the groundwater in Millfield showed contamination levels 60 times the legal limit. My mother was diagnosed in 2018, dead by 2020, along with 37 other Millfield residents. The class action lawsuit was dismissed because no one could afford to fight your army of lawyers." She pulled a napkin from her apron and scribbled something on it. "That's my mother's name, Margaret Reyes. Look her up sometime between board meetings. See what your clean energy revolution cost." Sophia placed the napkin beside his whiskey and walked away, straight to the locker room where she removed her bow tie, her apron, and her name tag. She knew she'd just lost her job, but the strange lightness in her chest almost made it worth it. 6 months of serving the wealthy in silence, and she'd finally spoken her truth. She was halfway to the employee exit when Marcus intercepted her. "Sophia, what the hell? Mr. Thorne is asking for you." "I quit March," she said simply. "You can't. He's not angry. He wants to talk to you." Sophia hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. I'll get my last words in." When she returned to table 14, Harrison Thorne was standing, coat draped over his arm, the napkin with her mother's name clutched in his hand. His face was unreadable. "Your mother?" he said without preamble. "Tell me more. Why? So your PR team can craft a better response when the next lawsuit comes?" "No." For the first time, his composure seemed to crack. "Because I didn't know." Sophia laughed bitterly. "That's the problem, isn't it? You never do. You're too far removed from the consequences of your actions. Then help me understand them." The request was so unexpected that Sophia found herself momentarily speechless. "I have a car waiting," Harrison continued. "And come to my office. Show me what happened in Millfield. All of it. It's after midnight. I own the building. Time is irrelevant." Sophia studied his face, looking for deception, for the trap. Instead, she saw something unexpected. Uncertainty. Harrison Thorne, Billionaire CEO, looked like a man who had just discovered his compass had been miscalibrated for years. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. He looked down at the napkin in his hand, at the name she had written there. "Because your mother deserves more than a napkin's worth of justice." The city lights reflected in his eyes as he waited for her answer, and Sophia felt the strange sensation that this moment, this breath, was a fulcrum upon which both their lives might pivot. "1 hour, she finally said. "I'll give you 1 hour to convince me you actually care." Harrison nodded once, decisive again. "The 1 hour is all I need to begin making this right." As they walked through the empty restaurant toward the waiting black car outside, neither of them could have predicted how that single hour would stretch into days, then weeks, then months, or how a hastily scribbled name on a napkin would eventually bring down an empire and build something more meaningful in its place. The elevator ascended with unsettling smoothness, 60 floors of silence stretching between them. Sophia stood with her arms crossed, staring at her reflection in the polished brass doors. She still wore her waitress uniform, the crisp white shirt now wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Beside her, Harrison Thorne's reflection stood perfectly still, the napkin with her mother's name now tucked into his breast pocket. The Thorne Industries headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming tower that pierced the Manhattan skyline like a silver needle. At this hour, the building was nearly empty, their footsteps echoing across the marble lobby as security nodded them through with deferential murmurs of, "Good evening, Mr. Thorne." "Why did you keep the napkin?" Sophia finally asked as the elevator chimed for the executive floor. Harrison considered her question. "Evidence," he said simply. Of what? My failure. The doors slid open to reveal an expansive office suite, bathed in the soft glow of ambient lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city that made Sophia momentarily forget her anger. New York spread beneath them like a circuit board of light, beautiful and ordered from this height, so different from the chaotic, struggling city she navigated daily. Harrison walked to a wall of glass and pressed his palm against a hidden sensor. A panel slid open, revealing a room that looked more like a war room than an executive office. Multiple screens, digital maps, and what appeared to be a holographic projection system. My private workspace, he explained, gesturing for her to enter. No assistants, no board members, no shareholders, just the truth. Sophia stepped inside cautiously. The impressive tech for covering up environmental disasters. His jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he moved to a central console and typed a series of commands. Computer, access all files related to Riverside Chemical Processing, New Jersey, acquisition date 2015 to present. Authorization, Thorn Alpha 793. The screens around them illuminated with documents, spreadsheets, and satellite imagery. Harrison stepped back. Udr, you have complete access. Show me what happened in Millfield. For a moment, Sophia hesitated. This felt like a trap, or perhaps an elaborate performance designed to placate her before security escorted her out. But the intensity in Harrison's eyes seemed genuine, or he was a better actor than she gave him credit for. I need a computer, she said. He pointed to a sleek workstation. Everything is connected to our secure servers. If you need external access, just ask. Sophia sat down, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Years of research, of gathering evidence while watching her mother wither away, of hitting wall after wall of corporate silence, and now she was sitting in the sanctum of the man ultimately responsible. You really don't know, do you? She asked, studying his face. I acquired dozens of companies annually. Riverside was a small acquisition handled by my mergers team. His voice was measured, careful. The environmental reports showed compliance with regulations. Falsified reports, Sophia said, beginning to type. Riverside had been dumping processing chemicals into an abandoned quarry for years before you acquired them. Your team never conducted independent testing. They accepted Riverside's documentation at face value. Harrison moved closer, watching as she pulled up geological survey maps of Millfield and overlaid them with water table data. The contamination followed this aquifer pattern, she continued, highlighting a blue vein that ran beneath the town. By 2017, it had reached the municipal water supply. My mother lived here. She pointed to a street just downhill from the water treatment facility. The class action lawsuit, Harrison said. I remember seeing a brief about it. My legal team said it was without merit. Your legal team, Sophia replied bitterly, argued that the cancer cluster couldn't be definitively linked to the chemicals. That correlation doesn't equal causation. That the statute of limitations had expired since the original dumping occurred before your acquisition. She pulled up medical records, her mother's, and placed them alongside chemical analyses of the water. But the signature is unmistakable. Benzene derivatives, arsenic, chromium-6, all matching the chemical profile of Riverside's waste stream. Harrison's expression darkened as he studied the data. Oh, this should have been caught in due diligence. It would have been if anyone had actually looked. Sophia opened another file. Internal emails from Riverside executives discussing how to streamline the acquisition process by managing environmental concerns. They knew they buried it, and your team was too focused on quarterly profits to care. For several long minutes, Harrison said nothing, absorbing the evidence displayed across the screens. Sophia watched him, trying to reconcile this contemplative man with the corporate monster she'd blamed for her mother's death for so long. Finally, he spoke. I built this company to create sustainable energy solutions, to help fix the environmental catastrophe we're facing. He gestured to a wall where patents for solar technologies, efficient batteries, and carbon capture systems were displayed. I never wanted this. Good intentions don't bring back the dead, Sophia said, but some of the venom had left her voice. Harrison turned to her, his expression resolute. No, they don't, but actions might prevent more deaths. He pressed another series of commands on the console. Computer, initiate protocol sunlight, authorization, Thorn Beta 258. The screens flickered and a new interface appeared. Simpler, more streamlined, with a red border. What is this? Sophia asked. A separate system I created for internal investigation, untraceable, unhackable, and completely isolated from our corporate servers. He looked at her directly. I've had suspicions about certain acquisitions before, never evidence this concrete. You're telling me you built a secret system to investigate your own company. I built an empire too large to oversee personally. This is my failsafe. He straightened his tie, a nervous gesture that seemed oddly human. Riverside isn't the first subsidiary to operate outside my ethical parameters, but it will be the last. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying him. What exactly are you planning to do? First, immediate remediation in Millfield, water purification systems for affected homes, comprehensive health screening for all residents, and a proper cleanup of the contamination source. His voice took on the crisp efficiency of a CEO, accustomed to giving orders. Second, full compensation for victims and their families, no settlements with gag orders, no protracted legal battle. And third, Sophia prompted, not quite ready to believe him. Harrison's eyes met hers, cold with determination. Third, I find out who knew about this and did nothing, who falsified reports, who decided profit margins were worth more than human lives. His voice dropped to a near whisper, and I burn them to the ground. The vehemence in his voice startled her. Why should I believe you'll do any of this? Harrison walked to a wall safe, concealed behind a painting. How cliché, Sophia thought, and removed a leather portfolio. From it, he extracted a single sheet of paper and handed it to her. It was a letter, dated 20 years earlier, written in a firm, elegant hand. Harrison, remember why we started this? Not for wealth or power, but to leave the world better than we found it. The moment profit becomes more important than people, you've failed me and yourself. With love and faith in your better nature, Mom. Sophia looked up, unsure what to say. My mother died of lung cancer when I was in college, Harrison said quietly. Downwind from a coal plant. That's why I built all of this. He gestured to the gleaming office, the empire beyond the windows. Somewhere along the way, I stopped looking closely enough at what was being done in my name. The revelation hung between them, neither accusation nor excuse, simply truth. 1 hour, Sophia reminded him, checking her watch. That was our deal, Harrison nodded. And what's your verdict? Sophia stood, gathering her purse. I need to see action, not promises. I'll be watching what happens in Millfield. Fair enough. He reached for a business card and scribbled something on the back. My personal number. Call me in 3 days. I'll show you what I've done. As Sophia walked toward the elevator, card in hand, she turned back. Why do you care what I think? I'm just a waitress. The ghost of a smile touched Harrison's lips. And a waitress with an environmental science background who had the courage to confront me with the truth when everyone else was too afraid. I need that kind of clarity if I'm going to fix what's broken. The elevator doors closed between them, leaving Sophia to wonder if she'd just witnessed genuine redemption beginning or the most elaborate corporate performance of her life. 3 days passed in a blur of apartment hunting and job applications. Sophia's savings wouldn't cover next month's rent, and her impulsive confrontation with Harrison Thorne had cost her the best-paying service job she'd ever had. Marcus had been apologetic but firm. You don't accuse billionaire regulars of corporate manslaughter, even if you're right. She sat on the worn couch in her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by newspapers circled with red marker, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Ms. Reyes. Harrison Thorne's voice was unmistakable. It's been 3 days. Sophia checked her watch. To the hour, impressive time management. A car is waiting downstairs. I'd like to show you something. She peered out her window to the street below. Sure enough, a sleek black Audi idled at the curb, the driver standing beside it looking up at her building. How do you know where I live? A pause. Do you really want me to answer that? Sophia sighed. Billionaires and their resources. No, but this better be worth my time. I have 3 job interviews tomorrow. You won't need them." The line went dead before she could respond. Sophia stared at her phone, indignation warring with curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, she grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. The driver opened the door without a word. Inside, instead of Harrison Thorne, she found a tablet resting on the leather seat with a post-it note. "Watch me." She settled into the car and pressed play on the cued video as they pulled away from the curb. It was a news report dated that morning. Breaking news from Millfield, New Jersey, where residents are seeing a flurry of unexpected activity. Thorne Industries has announced an immediate $50 million remediation project for what they're calling historical contamination from a subsidiary chemical processing plant. The company has already begun installing water filtration systems in affected homes and established a health screening center at the local community college. In a surprising move, CEO Harrison Thorne has personally taken responsibility for the environmental disaster, stating in a press release, "The failure was mine, and the solution will be mine as well." The report cut to footage of workers installing filtration systems and setting up medical tents, then to Harrison himself standing amid concerned residents, listening as an older man gesticulated angrily. No handlers, no security, just the billionaire CEO facing the community's righteous anger directly. As the video ended, the car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath an unremarkable office building in Midtown. The driver escorted her to a private elevator that required his thumbprint to operate. "Mr. Thorne is waiting upstairs," he said as the doors closed. The elevator opened directly into a converted loft space. Industrial windows spanned the walls, flooding the room with afternoon light. Long tables covered with documents and computer monitors filled the center, while one wall was dedicated entirely to photographs, faces of men and women Sophia didn't recognize, connected by red string like something from a detective show. Harrison stood by the windows, his back to her, suit jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up. He turned as she entered, and Sophia was struck by how different he looked. The composed, imperious businessman from Bellini's was gone, replaced by someone with shadows under his eyes and a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "I haven't slept much." He gestured around the room. "Welcome to Operation Phoenix. I needed a space off the corporate grid." Phoenix, rising from the ashes, Harrison walked to the wall of photographs. "I've spent the last 72 hours uncovering who knew what and when about Riverside Chemical. It goes deeper than I expected." Sophia approached the wall. "Who are these people?" "Former Riverside executive, my mergers and acquisitions team, legal counsel." His voice hardened. "But the ones with red X's have already been terminated. The ones circled in blue knew about the contamination but buried it in reports. The ones in yellow facilitated the cover-up after the fact." Sophia studied the photographs, the complex web of corporate complicity laid bare. "This is thorough. I've been thorough my entire career, Miss Juan Reyes. Just about the wrong things. Apparently." He handed her a folder. "This is for you." Inside was a legal document titled Millfield Victim Compensation Fund with a figure that made her eyes widen. $200 million. Initial funding. It will grow as needed. Your mother's name is first on the list. Sophia flipped through the pages, seeing the familiar names of her mother's neighbors, friends from the cancer support group, all listed with preliminary compensation figures. "Why are you showing me this?" Harrison leaned against a table. "Because I need your help." "My help," she repeated skeptically. "With what?" "Oversight, accountability." He pointed to another folder. "That's a job offer. Environmental Compliance Director for the newly formed Thorne Industries Transparency Division. You'd report directly to me, with authority to investigate any subsidiary, access any document, and shut down operations if you find violations." Sophia laughed in disbelief. "You want to hire the waitress who confronted you about killing her mother? I want to hire the environmental scientist who had the integrity and courage to tell me the truth to my face." He crossed his arms. "Do your Columbia professors speak highly of your work before you dropped out? Professor Ahmadi called you brilliant but uncompromising. I need uncompromising right now. This is crazy. Sophia set down the folder. You don't know me. I know enough. Harrison's expression was intense. You have every reason to hate me and my company, which makes you perfect for this. You won't be bought off or intimidated. You'll keep me honest. Sophia circled the room, trying to process the offer. What's the catch? No catch. Competitive salary, complete autonomy, and my personal guarantee that your findings will be acted upon no matter who they implicate, even you, especially me. He approached a large touchscreen and brought up a map dotted with red pins. These are all Thorn Industries subsidiaries worldwide, 37 countries, over 200 facilities. I can't personally inspect each one, but I need someone who will hold them to the standard I should have been enforcing all along. Sophia studied the map, the scale of the operation finally sinking in. This would take a team, not just one person. You'd build the team, hire whoever you need. Budget won't be an issue. The offer was surreal. From serving his whiskey to potentially wielding more environmental oversight power than most government agencies. Why go to these lengths? PR damage control would be cheaper. Harrison was quiet for a moment, then walked to his desk and retrieved the napkin with her mother's name. It was now laminated, preserved like evidence. And when I was 22, I made a promise over my mother's grave that I would build something that would help heal the planet, not harm it. I've spent 25 years believing I was keeping that promise. His voice was low, controlled, but with an undercurrent of genuine pain. Your napkin showed me I've failed spectacularly. I can't undo what happened to your mother, but I can make damn sure it never happens again. The rawness of his response caught her off guard. Sophia had expected corporate calculation, not what appeared to be authentic remorse. I still don't trust you, she said finally. Good. Trust should be earned, not given. He extended his hand. Work with me for 3 months. If you're not satisfied with the changes we're making, walk away with a severance package that will cover your mother's medical debts. Sophia stared at his outstretched hand, weighing decades of righteous anger against the unexpected opportunity to create actual change from within the system she'd been fighting. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her that her environmental career might be resurrected by the very corporation that had destroyed her family. 3 months, she said, not taking his hand yet. But I want it in writing that I can investigate anything, including your personal involvement in acquisitions. And I choose my team. No corporate yes men. Harrison nodded. Already in the contract, page 3, section 2. Sophia finally shook his hand, feeling as though she were making a deal with the devil, or perhaps with a man trying desperately not to be the devil anymore. One more condition, she added, releasing his hand. I want to visit Millfield today. I want to see what you're doing there firsthand. The helicopter is on the roof, Harrison replied without hesitation. We leave in 30 minutes. The helicopter cut through the afternoon sky, Manhattan's skyline receding behind them as they flew southwest toward New Jersey. Sophia had never been in a private helicopter before. The leather seats, noise-canceling headsets, and champagne chilling in a built-in cooler were reminders of the vast gulf between her world and Harrison's. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Harrison's voice came through her headset. He sat across from her, reviewing documents on a tablet. Even in the midst of a corporate crisis, his posture remained impeccable, his movements precise. How many people in Millfield were affected? Sophia asked. Harrison swiped to a new document. Our current estimate is 342 households within the contamination zone, approximately 1,200 residents total. 43 confirmed cancer cases linked to the chemical profile, including your mother. 29 fatalities. The clinical recitation of human suffering made Sophia's stomach turn. 29 families destroyed. 29 empty chairs at dinner tables. Harrison looked up, meeting her gaze. I know, numbers don't capture it. He set the tablet down. That's why we're going. I need to see their faces. The helicopter began its descent toward a high school football field where a small, welcoming committee waited. As they touched down, Sophia recognized the Millfield mayor from news clips, along with what appeared to be emergency management personnel. Ready? Harrison asked as the rotors slowed. Are you? Sophia countered, a tight smile. No, but that's irrelevant. They stepped onto the field, and the mayor approached, hand extended. Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming personally. We've prepared a briefing on the current situation. Later, Harrison interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. I want to see the affected neighborhoods first. The water treatment facility, the quarry where the dumping occurred. The mayor hesitated. Sir, we've organized a more controlled itinerary. I'm sure you have. Harrison's tone left no room for argument. But I'm here to see the reality, not a sanitized tour. Ms. Reyes will guide us. Sophia hadn't expected this, but quickly recovered. We should start with Oakwood Drive. That's where the contamination was most concentrated. 20 minutes later, they stood on the street where Sophia had grown up, where her mother had lived until hospital stays became more frequent than nights at home. The neighborhood was modest, single-story ranch homes with small yards, American flags, and basketball hoops. Now, work trucks lined the street, technicians installing filtration systems in homes, while medical staff conducted screenings in a mobile unit parked at the cul-de-sac. This was our house, Sophia said, stopping in front of a blue bungalow with white trim. The flower beds her mother had lovingly tended were overgrown now. The for sale sign in the yard faded from months of sun exposure. We couldn't afford to keep it after she got sick. Harrison said nothing, but she saw him note the address in his phone. An elderly woman emerged from the house next door, watching them with suspicious eyes. Recognition dawned on her face as she spotted Sophia. Sophie Reyes. The woman approached slowly, leaning on a cane. Is that really you, Mrs. Abernathy? Sophia embraced her gently. How are you? Oh, hanging in there. Mrs. Abernathy's gaze shifted to Harrison, hardening instantly. And you must be the big shot responsible for all this. Come to see your handiwork. To his credit, Harrison didn't flinch. Yes, ma'am, I'm Harrison Thorne. I'm deeply sorry for what my company's negligence has done to your community. Mrs. Abernathy studied him, then turned back to Sophia. And your mother would be proud, seeing you bring him here. She always said someday someone would be held accountable. Mrs. Abernathy was diagnosed last year, Sophia explained quietly. Liver cancer, same chemical markers as Mom's. The older woman lifted her chin defiantly. The doctors gave me 6 months. That was 8 months ago. I'm too stubborn to give this place the satisfaction of another funeral. Harrison stepped forward. Mrs. Abernathy, I know nothing I can say will undo the harm that's been done, but I promise you we will make this right, not just with money, but with real change. Pretty words, she replied skeptically. But words don't cure cancer, young man. No, they don't. Actions do. He gestured to the medical team down the street. We've brought in oncologists specializing in chemical exposure cases. I'd like them to review your treatment plan, if you're willing. Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened slightly. I'll think about it. She turned to go, then paused. Your mother's roses are dying, she said to Sophia. Someone should tend to them. After she'd gone, Sophia and Harrison continued down the street. Work crews nodded respectfully as they passed, unaware of Sophia's connection to the community, seeing only the billionaire CEO and his associate. The filtration systems are a start, Sophia observed, but the groundwater itself needs remediation. Already underway, Harrison replied. We've begun installing extraction wells at strategic points along the aquifer. The contaminated water will be pumped out, treated, and returned clean. They reached the end of the street, where a chain-link fence separated the residential area from an industrial zone beyond. Through the fence, Sophia could see the water treatment facility, where the contamination had entered the municipal supply. This is where it happened, she said quietly. But the chemicals accumulated in the treatment process because nobody was testing for them specifically. By the time anyone realized, it had been happening for years. Harrison approached the fence, gripping the metal links as he stared at the facility. Who owns the water treatment plant? The municipality, but they followed standard testing protocol. They weren't looking for the specific compounds Riverside was dumping because they didn't know they needed to. His jaw jaw tightened, another failure of oversight. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of consequence heavy between them. "Show me the quarry," Harrison finally said. The abandoned stone quarry sat on Riverside's property, a half-mile from the residential zone. Once a source of limestone for construction, it had become a convenient disposal site for chemicals too expensive to process properly. From the edge, they could see the oily sheen on the stagnant water below, the unnatural blue-green color, a warning sign any environmental scientist would recognize immediately. "This should have been contained decades ago," Sophia said, anger edging her voice. "One proper inspection would have found this, and now it will take years to clean up." Harrison surveyed the contaminated pit. "We'll need to drain it completely, remove all the affected soil, and cap it properly. At what cost? Whatever it takes." He turned to her. "This isn't about the money, Sophia." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. The corporate mask had slipped further, revealing not just responsibility, but genuine horror at what had been done in his company's name. As they returned to the helicopter, Sophia noticed Harrison had been unusually quiet after seeing the quarry. He stared out the window as they flew back toward Manhattan, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape below. "You're thinking something," she said finally. "What is it?" Harrison turned to her, his expression grave. "Riverside isn't an isolated incident. It can't be." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if this happened at one subsidiary, with this many people involved in the cover-up, then it's almost certainly happening elsewhere." He ran a hand through his silver hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "How many other communities are suffering while I remain ignorant in my tower?" The question hung in the air between them as New York came into view, the city's lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Sophia had expected corporate damage control today, a PR exercise designed to placate her. Instead, she'd witnessed what appeared to be a genuine moral reckoning. "That's why you need me," she said. "To find out." Harrison nodded slowly. "Not just you. We need a complete paradigm shift. Environmental compliance can't be a secondary consideration buried in quarterly reports. It needs to be our primary concern, with real consequences for violations." He looked at her directly. "Will you help me build that?" As the helicopter descended toward the Thorn Industries tower, Sophia thought about her mother's voice the last time they'd spoken. "Don't give up the fight, Sophie. Just find a different battlefield." Perhaps this was it. The battlefield she'd never expected to find. "Yes," she said finally, "but we do it my way. No compromises. No compromises." Harrison agreed as they touched down on the rooftop helipad. The city spread out below them like a sea of possibilities and pitfalls, waiting to be navigated together. 6 weeks into her new role as environmental compliance director, Sophia still felt like an imposter every time she swiped her access card at Thorn Industries headquarters. The executive floor, her floor now, was a world away from serving whiskey at Bellini's. The staff had initially regarded her with thinly veiled skepticism. Who was this outsider with no corporate experience suddenly wielding extraordinary power? The whispers followed her through the sleek corridors. Harrison's guilt project, the waitress with a vendetta. She ignored them and got to work. Sophia had assembled a team of 12 environmental scientists, 3 investigative journalists, and 4 former EPA prosecutors, people with no ties to Thorn Industries and reputations for uncompromising integrity. They occupied a dedicated floor nicknamed the Lighthouse, for its mandate to shine light into dark corners. Today, she stood before her team in their glass-walled conference room, the Manhattan skyline a dramatic backdrop as she pointed to a digital map covered with red, yellow, and green pins. "We've completed preliminary assessments of 34 facilities," she reported. 7 show critical compliance failures requiring immediate intervention. She highlighted the red pins. 12 have significant issues that need addressing within 30 days. The yellow pins blinked, and 15 appear to be operating within acceptable parameters, though we'll conduct on-site verifications to be certain. Dr. Elaine Chen, a hydrogeologist who'd left a tenured university position to join Sophia's team, raised her hand. "And but the processing plant in Malaysia is still denying us access. They claim our investigation violates local protocols." Sophia made a note. "Forward me their refusal. I'll escalate to Harrison directly. She still couldn't bring herself to call him Thorn like the other executives did. In her mind, he remained Harrison, the man who'd listened to her accusation over whiskey and actually done something about it. After the meeting, Sophia retreated to her office to prepare for her weekly one-on-one with Harrison. These meetings had evolved from formal progress reports to candid strategy sessions, often running late into the evening. Today, she had troubling news to deliver. At precisely 6 p.m., she entered Harrison's office. He stood by the windows, watching the sunset paint the city in amber hues, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. The Malaysia situation has escalated, she began without preamble. They'd long since dispensed with pleasantries. Richardson called you, Harrison said, turning to face her. It wasn't a question. He tried to convince me to prioritize other facilities and leave Malaysia for next quarter. Sophia set her tablet on his desk. When I refused, he suggested my team might be overreaching our mandate. Harrison's expression hardened. James Richardson was Thorn Industries' Chief Operating Officer, a 20-year veteran of the company and Harrison's right hand in global operations. What did you tell him? That he was welcome to raise his concerns with you directly. Sophia crossed her arms. He then implied that you and I have a personal arrangement that's clouding your judgment. A muscle in Harrison's jaw twitched, the only sign that the insinuation bothered him. Richardson is worried. The Malaysia facility is one of our highest producing manufacturing centers and one of our highest risk environmental liabilities based on satellite imagery and wastewater testing downstream from the plant. Sophia pulled up thermal imaging on the tablet. They're dumping at night when they think no one is watching. Harrison studied the evidence, his face unreadable. You need to go there. I've already booked the flight, leaving tomorrow. He nodded, then hesitated. Richardson isn't the only one concerned about our approach. The board is meeting next week to discuss the financial implications of Operation Phoenix. Sophia felt a chill. You said I'd have full autonomy. You do, but I answer to shareholders, and they're watching our stock price drop as remediation costs mount. Harrison ran a hand through his silver hair. The Millfield settlement alone wiped out last quarter's profits. So what? You're a billionaire many times over. My personal wealth isn't the issue. If the board loses confidence in my leadership, they could vote to replace me. His voice remained steady, but Sophia had learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders. My successor might not share our commitment. The implications hung heavy in the air. Everything they'd built could be dismantled with a single boardroom vote. Then we need to change the narrative, Sophia said firmly. Show them this isn't just about paying for past mistakes, it's about securing Thorn Industries' future. Harrison raised an eyebrow. How do you propose we do that? The Philippines project. It's ready. For the past month, alongside the investigations, Sophia had been developing what she called redemption projects, initiatives that combined environmental remediation with innovative business opportunities. The Philippines proposal was her most ambitious, transforming a contaminated Thorn Industries mining site into the world's largest floating solar farm, simultaneously cleaning up toxic tailings and generating renewable energy. Harrison studied her for a long moment. The capital expenditure would be enormous. So will the returns, both financial and reputational. Sophia moved to stand beside him at the window. Show the board we're not just fixing problems, we're creating solutions that will position Thorn Industries as the leader in corporate environmental responsibility. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell. 6 weeks ago, they'd been strangers on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, co-architects of a transformation neither had fully anticipated. Dinner? Harrison asked suddenly. There's a new place on Madison I've been meaning to try. Sophia hesitated. Their professional relationship had developed an intensity that sometimes blurred boundaries. Late-night strategy sessions, text messages at odd hours, a growing shorthand between them that excluded others. She was conscious of the rumors already circulating through the company. I should prepare for Malaysia, she demurred. Harrison nodded, accepting her boundary without question. Of course. I'll have the jet ready for you tomorrow morning. Take Chen and Alvarez with you. You'll need the technical expertise. And if Richardson interferes, he won't. Harrison's tone left no room for doubt. "But if anyone at the facility blocks your investigation, call me directly. Any hour." As Sophia gathered her materials to leave, Harrison spoke again, his voice quieter. "Under the napkin, the one with your mother's name. I keep it in my desk." She paused, surprised by the personal admission. "It reminds me every day of what happens when profit becomes more important than people." He met her gaze directly. "Whatever the board says next week, whatever Richardson thinks, I won't forget that lesson again." Sophia nodded, unexpectedly moved. "Good, because I won't let you." After she left, Harrison remained by the window, watching the city that housed his empire. In 6 weeks, Sophia Reyes had upended systems that had operated unchecked for decades. She'd created enemies in every division, confronted executives who'd never been questioned, and demanded a standard of accountability that was as uncomfortable as it was necessary. And in doing so, she'd begun to restore something he hadn't realized was missing: his purpose. His phone chimed with a message from Richardson. "We need to discuss the Reyes situation before it gets further out of hand." Harrison didn't respond. Instead, he sent a different message to his personal attorney. "Prepare contingency plans for board resistance. I want options that maintain our environmental initiatives regardless of vote outcomes." The game was changing. For 25 years, Harrison Thorne had built his empire by the established rules of business. Now he was prepared to rewrite those rules entirely, because a waitress had handed him a napkin with a message he couldn't ignore. The Malaysian heat hit Sophia like a physical force as she descended the steps of Thorne Industries' private jet. Kuala Lumpur shimmered in the distance, a jagged skyline of towers rising from the tropical haze. Dr. Chen and Alvarez, her environmental law specialist, followed close behind, both looking as out of place in their business attire as she felt in hers. Ms. Reyes, a man in a crisp white shirt, approached with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Malaysia. I'm David Lim, Facility Director. We weren't expecting such distinguished visitors." His emphasis on the word made it clear what he really thought of their arrival. Sophia extended her hand with the confidence she'd been cultivating for these encounters. "Mr. Lim, we appreciate your accommodation on short notice. I trust you received our equipment manifests." The smile tightened. "Yes, though I must say some of your testing requirements are quite extensive. Perhaps we could discuss modifications to your protocol over lunch. The executive dining room has been prepared. We'll begin work immediately," Sophia interrupted. "Our schedule is tight, and we have 7 sampling sites to assess before sundown." Lim's expression flickered between displeasure and resignation. "As you wish. I've assigned Mr. Tan to assist you." He gestured to a younger man hovering nearby. "He'll ensure you have everything you need within our safety parameters." Translation: "He'll monitor your every move and report back to me." "Perfect." Sophia smiled thinly. "Shall we begin with the effluent treatment system?" For the next 6 hours, Sophia and her team methodically worked through the sprawling chemical processing facility. They collected water samples from discharge points, soil from surrounding areas, and air quality readings from the perimeter. Mr. Tan shadowed them vigilantly, occasionally murmuring into his phone when they lingered too long in certain areas. By late afternoon, they had reached the restricted zone that had triggered their satellite concerns, a section of the facility where thermal imaging had detected nighttime activity inconsistent with reported operations. "This area is undergoing maintenance," Tan explained smoothly as they approached a locked gate. "I'm afraid it's not accessible today." Sophia exchanged glances with Chen. "We need access to complete our assessment, Mr. Tan." "Perhaps tomorrow." "Today," she insisted, "or I make a call that none of us will enjoy." The threat hung in the humid air. After a moment, Tan stepped aside to make a call of his own. While he was distracted, Chen whispered to Sophia, "The water samples from the eastern perimeter are already showing elevated chromium levels, well above compliance thresholds." Sophia nodded grimly. "Alvarez, start documenting everything. I want time-stamped photos of every sample collection point." Tan returned, his expression carefully neutral. Director Lim will escort you personally. 20 minutes later, they stood inside a vast warehouse that had been conspicuously absent from the facility schematics provided to Thorn Industries' corporate office. The space was filled with row upon row of unmarked barrels. Chemical storage, Lim explained with practiced casualness. The temporaries, of course. Chen was already moving between the containers, her handheld analyzer whirring softly. These aren't on the manifest, she noted. What's in them? Processing byproducts awaiting proper disposal, Lim replied, his eyes following Chen warily. Sophia approached one of the barrels, noting the corrosion around its sealed lid. How long is temporary, Mr. Lim? A pause. We ship them quarterly to a disposal facility. Which facility? Alvarez asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Another pause. I'd need to check the exact name. Sophia's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Harrison. Board meeting moved up. Tomorrow. Richardson making his move. Her stomach tightened. The timing couldn't be worse. Dr. Chen, she called. To, what are your preliminary findings? Chen looked up from her analyzer, her expression grave. Multiple VOCs present in concentrations exceeding safety standards by 300%. Evidence of improper sealing, and based on dust accumulation patterns, these barrels haven't been moved in months, possibly years. Lim's professional demeanor finally cracked. This is a complex operation, Ms. Reyes. Sometimes regulatory ideals must be balanced with operational realities. Stop, Sophia held up her hand. Let's not pretend this is a minor procedural oversight. You're storing hazardous waste improperly and likely disposing of it illegally. She turned to Alvarez. Begin shutdown documentation. Lim's face paled. You can't shut us down. We supply components to 17 production lines across Asia. The disruption would cost millions daily. The liability of continuing these practices would cost billions, Sophia countered, not to mention human lives. Richardson assured us that your inspection was a formality, Lim blurted, then immediately looked as if he regretted the words. Sophia went still. Richardson knew about this. Lim's silence was answer enough. Mr. Lim, she said quietly, I suggest you start cooperating fully because this facility is now under direct oversight from New York. Effective immediately, all operations are suspended pending environmental remediation and protocol overhaul. She stepped away to make the call she'd been dreading, walking outside into the fading tropical sunset. Harrison answered on the first ring. It's worse than we thought, she said without preamble. O'Day and Richardson knew. He's been running interference for them. Harrison's voice was tight with controlled anger. How bad? Critical. Years of improper chemical storage. Evidence of nighttime dumping. I'm implementing emergency shutdown protocols. A beat of silence. Do what needs to be done. I'll handle Richardson and the board. Harrison, she hesitated. If Richardson has been protecting this facility, how many others has he covered for? This could be systemic. I know. His voice was weary in a way she hadn't heard before. Come back tonight. I need you here for the board meeting. But the investigation. Leave Chen and Alvarez to document everything. I need you for what's coming next. The gravity in his tone left no room for argument. I'll be on the next flight. 14 hours later. Sophia stepped into the Thorn Industries executive boardroom, still wearing the same clothes from Malaysia, her exhaustion masked by determination. The room fell silent as she entered. 12 board members sat around the massive table, with Harrison at its head. Richardson occupied the seat to his right, his expression a study in controlled hostility. Ms. Reyes, Harrison acknowledged her formally. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. The board has questions about your findings in Malaysia. She understood the game immediately. This wasn't just about one facility. It was about the future of Operation Phoenix itself. Richardson had orchestrated this confrontation, hoping to catch her unprepared and discredit her in front of the board. But Sophia hadn't come unprepared. Of course, she replied, moving to the presentation screen. I've prepared a comprehensive assessment. For the next 30 minutes, she methodically laid out the evidence from Malaysia, the illegal waste storage, the environmental testing results, the documented violations of both international standards and Thorn Industries' own stated policies. She concluded with satellite imagery showing nighttime dumping activities over a 3-year period. "This isn't an isolated incident," she finished. "It's a deliberate pattern of environmental negligence that creates massive liability for Thorn Industries." Richardson leaned forward. "What Ms. Reyes fails to mention is the economic impact of her draconian measures. The Malaysia facility shutdown will cost us $14 million per week in lost production. Her entire crusade has already devalued company stock by nearly 8%. An older board member nodded. "Mr. Thorne, while we appreciate your commitment to corporate responsibility, these costs are becoming untenable." Harrison remained impassive. "And what would be the cost of allowing these practices to continue? Another Millfield, another round of cancer clusters and lawsuits. We could implement changes gradually," Richardson suggested smoothly. "A phased approach that maintains production while addressing the most critical issues." Sophia couldn't contain herself. "Mr. Richardson, were you aware of the conditions at the Malaysia facility before our investigation?" The room went silent. Richardson's smile never wavered. "I receive hundreds of operational reports weekly, Ms. Reyes. I can't be expected to micromanage every facility." "That's not what I asked," Sophia pressed. "Director Lim specifically mentioned your name. He said you assured him our inspection was a formality." Richardson's eyes hardened, but before he could respond, Harrison stood. "This discussion is becoming circular," he announced. "The board has a decision to make. Continue with Operation Phoenix as currently structured, or pursue an alternative approach." He looked around the table. "It'll step out to allow for a candid deliberation." He gestured for Sophia to follow him. Outside in the hallway, she finally allowed her exhaustion to show. "They're going to shut us down," she said quietly. Harrison's expression was unreadable. Perhaps. Harrison, Richardson has been orchestrating this from the beginning. He's been protecting these facilities, and now he's using the financial impact to turn the board against us." "I know." His calm was maddening. "Then why aren't you fighting harder?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because sometimes you need to let a situation reach its crisis point before real change can happen." Before she could demand clarification, the boardroom door opened. Richardson emerged, triumph barely concealed beneath his professional veneer. "The board has reached a decision," he announced. "They'd like to speak with you, Harrison, alone." Sophia paced the executive floor hallway, the Malaysia jet lag and mounting tension making each minute feel like an hour. Around her, Thorn Industries continued its normal operations. Assistants hurried past with coffee. Analysts huddled over tablets discussing quarterly projections, all oblivious to the battle being waged behind the boardroom's heavy oak doors. Through the glass walls of a nearby conference room, she caught sight of her reflection. Rumpled clothes, exhausted eyes, hair hastily pulled back. She barely recognized herself. 2 months ago, she'd been refilling water glasses and memorizing wine lists. Now she was fighting for environmental justice at the highest corporate level, with billions of dollars and countless lives hanging in the balance. The boardroom door finally opened. Harrison emerged alone, his expression unreadable as he gestured for her to follow him to his private office. "Well?" she demanded the moment the door closed behind them. Harrison loosened his tie and poured 2 glasses of water. "The board has temporarily suspended Operation Phoenix, pending a comprehensive financial and operational review." The words landed like a physical blow. "They shut us down. Officially, they've pressed pause." Harrison handed her a glass. "Unofficially, Richardson convinced them that our approach is too aggressive and financially unsustainable. So everything we've done, Millfield, the other investigations, the Philippines project, it's all over." Her voice rose with disbelief and anger. "You're just going to accept that?" Harrison took a slow sip of water. "I told them I'd abide by their decision." Sophia stared at him, searching for the fighter she glimpsed these past weeks, the man who'd faced Millfield residents' anger without flinching, who'd promised to rebuild his company's ethical foundation regardless of cost. Instead, she saw only resignation. "You're giving up," she said flatly. "After everything we found in Malaysia, after your promises, I'm operating within the constraints of corporate governance." His tone was measured, neutral. As CEO, I serve at the pleasure of the board. And what about the people who are dying because of your company's negligence? Who serves their pleasure? Sophia set down her glass with enough force to splash water onto the polished desk. I trusted you. I believed you actually wanted to change things. Sophia, don't. She stepped back. I should have known better than to think a billionaire would choose people over profits when it really mattered. She turned to leave, disappointment a bitter taste in her mouth. I submitted my resignation, Harrison said quietly. Sophia froze with her hand on the doorknob. What? Effective immediately. I'm stepping down as CEO of Thorn Industries. She turned back slowly. That's your solution. Abandon ship when it gets difficult, not abandoning. Something had changed in his demeanor, a calm resolve replacing the corporate mask. Evolving our strategy. Harrison moved to the wall, safe behind his desk, entering a code and retrieving a thick folder. The board believes they've won today. Richardson thinks he's outmaneuvered us. They're wrong. He spread the contents across his desk, legal documents, stock certificates, charts of corporate ownership structures. For the past 6 weeks, while we've been building Operation Phoenix, I've been quietly restructuring my personal holdings and gathering evidence. Sophia approached cautiously. Evidence of what? Richardson's complicity. He hasn't just been covering for environmental violations. He's been profiting from them. Harrison pointed to a complex flowchart. He owns shell companies that provide waste management services to our facilities in Asia and Eastern Europe. Services that consist of illegal dumping at a fraction of proper disposal costs. He then bills Thorn Industries premium rates and pockets the difference. Sophia's eyes widened as she followed the money trail. How long have you known? I suspected after Millfield. Your Malaysia findings confirmed it. Harrison's expression hardened. Richardson isn't just negligent, he's criminal. And he's not alone. 3 board members have financial ties to his schemes. But if you resign, you lose your power to expose them. As CEO, I'm constrained by board oversight and shareholder interests. Harrison handed her another document. As the majority individual shareholder launching a whistleblower action with SEC backing, I'm free to tear the whole system down. The document was a formal SEC whistleblower complaint, meticulously detailed, with Harrison Thorn listed as the primary complainant. I filed this morning before the board meeting, he explained. Federal agents are currently seizing records from Richardson's offshore accounts. By resigning, I've removed any potential conflicts of interest in the investigation. Sophia struggled to process the revelation. You planned this all along. Not all along, he admitted, but after seeing the pattern emerging across multiple facilities, I realized the corruption was too deeply entrenched for conventional reform. The system needs to be burned down before it can be rebuilt. And the board just accepted your resignation? Just like that? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. They were relieved. They think with me gone, they can install Richardson as CEO and quietly bury Operation Phoenix. He checked his watch. They should be announcing his interim appointment right about now. You've set him up, Sophia realized, as you've handed him the one position that makes him personally liable for corporate malfeasance. The federal investigation will become public within 48 hours. Richardson will face criminal charges. The implicated board members will be forced to resign. Harrison's voice was calm, but held an undercurrent of steel. And then we rebuild. We? Sophia questioned. I still own 43% of Thorn Industries stock. Once the board is reconstituted, I'll have controlling influence without the constraints of executive management. He met her gaze directly. And I want you to lead the new Environmental Integrity Division. With expanded authority, increased funding, and a seat on the new board. Sophia sank into a chair, stunned by the scale of his gambit. You're sacrificing your position to save your mission. I'm sacrificing a title to fulfill a promise. Harrison retrieved something from his desk drawer, the laminated napkin with her mother's name. This was never about my position. It's about making this right. For the first time since they'd met, Sophia saw Harrison Thorn without any facade. Not the imperious billionaire from Bellini's, not the contrite CEO in Millfield, not even the determined reformer of recent weeks. Just a man trying to correct a moral course that had veered badly off track. It's a risk, she said finally. The plan depends on the SEC investigation, on public pressure, on a dozen variables you can't control. Yes, you could lose everything, only the parts that don't matter anymore. The simple honesty of his response stirred something unexpected in Sophia, a grudging admiration evolving into something more complex. Despite her exhaustion, she felt a second wind of resolve. And what do you need me to do? For the next 48 hours, continue as if nothing has changed. Keep your team focused on documentation and evidence preservation. Harrison handed her a secure phone. Then, when the investigation goes public, be ready to speak truth to power on a much larger stage. And if it fails, she asked, if Richardson and the board manage to bury the investigation? Harrison's expression was serene, like a man who had finally aligned his actions with his deepest values after years of compromise. Then I'll start over, build something new that honors that promise from the beginning. A knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison's assistant entered, her usual composure slightly frayed. Mr. Thorne, the board has announced Mr. Richardson as interim CEO, effective immediately. Security is requesting you vacate the premises by end of day. She glanced uncomfortably at Sophia. They've also revoked Miss Reyes' team's access credentials. Thank you, Diane. Please tell security I'll need a few more hours to collect my personal effects. Harrison's tone was courteous but firm. After she left, Sophia turned to Harrison. How long before they start destroying evidence? They already are, but they don't know about the backup servers in Zurich. He began gathering the documents from his desk. Everything is preserved, encrypted, and copied to the SEC's secure servers. The sheer audacity of his plan was beginning to sink in. Harrison Thorne, who had spent decades building one of the world's most powerful corporations, was deliberately triggering its implosion to force its rebirth. My mother would have liked you, Sophia said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. Harrison looked up, momentarily caught off guard. Not at first, she clarified with a small smile. She would have hated everything you represented. But this, she gestured to the evidence, the whistleblower complaint, his resignation letter. This, she would have respected. I wish I could have met her, he said quietly. Apologized in person. You're apologizing now, Sophia replied, in the only way that really matters. The following 48 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of corporate chaos. Sophia watched from the eye of the storm as Harrison's plan activated in precise sequence. By midnight, security had escorted Harrison from Thorne Tower, a humiliating exit captured by the business press, who'd been mysteriously tipped off about the boardroom coup. Photos of the billionaire founder carrying a cardboard box of personal effects splashed across financial news sites, accompanied by speculation about irreconcilable strategic differences with the board. By dawn, Sophia's team had been officially disbanded, their access badges deactivated, their offices sealed pending reorganization. Richardson wasted no time consolidating power, issuing an internal memo announcing a realignment of environmental priorities with operational realities, corporate speak for dismantling everything they'd built. What Richardson didn't know was that Harrison had prepared for this exact scenario. Sophia's team regrouped at a converted warehouse in Brooklyn that Harrison had quietly leased weeks earlier. The space was already equipped with secure servers, workstations, and a dedicated satellite uplink, a shadow operation ready to continue their work beyond corporate oversight. This feels like a spy movie, Dr. Chen remarked, as they assembled around a massive table covered with documentation from their investigations. Are we the good guys or the rogue agents? Both, Sophia replied, distributing secure phones to each team member. For the next 24 hours, we compile everything we have into the most damning, irrefutable case possible. When the SEC investigation goes public, we need to be ready with our side of the story. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Harrison. Wall Street Journal reporter, 2 p.m. Your story to tell. Sophia stared at the message, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Harrison was giving her the platform, trusting her to be the public face of their fight while he worked behind the scenes. At precisely 2 p.m., Sophia sat across from Eliza Fernandez, the journal's most respected investigative reporter. The woman's reputation for uncompromising integrity had earned her 2 Pulitzers and the fear of corrupt executives nationwide. "Why you?" Fernandez asked without preamble, her recorder running between them. "Out of everyone at Thorn Industries, why are you the one sitting here with evidence of what could be the largest corporate environmental scandal since Deepwater Horizon?" Sophia took a deep breath. Because 2 months ago, I was a waitress at Billionaire's who wrote a dead woman's name on a napkin and handed it to Harrison Thorn. For the next hour, Sophia told their story. Her mother's death from chemical exposure, her confrontation with Harrison, the creation of Operation Phoenix, and the systematic uncovering of Richardson's criminal enterprise. She provided documents, test results, and witness statements from communities affected by Thorn Industries' environmental negligence. "And Thorn himself?" Fernandez asked, examining the evidence with practiced skepticism. "You're painting him as some kind of corporate hero who sacrificed his position to expose corruption. That's not exactly consistent with his reputation." "I'm not claiming he's a hero," Sophia replied carefully. "For 25 years, he built an empire without looking closely enough at the foundation. His negligence cost lives, including my mother's. Nothing can change that. But when confronted with the truth, he chose accountability over denial. How many billionaires do that?" Fernandez made a non-committal noise, still scanning the documents. "These allegations against Richardson are explosive. You understand he'll deny everything, call you a disgruntled employee, claim these documents are fabricated. That's why we have this." Sophia slid a final thumb drive across the table. Recorded conversations between Richardson and facility directors in Malaysia, Brazil, and Romania, discussing their special arrangement for waste disposal. "The originals are already with the SEC." The reporter's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that she recognized the magnitude of what she was being handed. "This story runs tomorrow. Are you prepared for what happens next?" Was she? 2 months ago, Sophia had been anonymous, just another struggling service worker in a city full of them. After tomorrow, she would be at the center of a corporate firestorm, targeted by powerful people with resources to destroy her. "Yes," she said with more confidence than she felt, "the truth is worth it." As Sophia left the interview, her phone buzzed again. "Dinner, my place. 8 p.m. We need to prepare for tomorrow." Harrison's place turned out to be a surprisingly modest brownstone in the West Village, elegant but understated, with none of the ostentatious wealth she'd expected from a man worth billions. Books lined the walls, artwork that appeared chosen for personal meaning rather than investment value hung in simple frames, and the furniture looked well used and comfortable. "And not what you pictured?" Harrison asked, noting her expression as he took her coat. "I was expecting something more obnoxious," he suggested, with the ghost of a smile. "Billionaire-ish," she amended diplomatically. He led her through to a kitchen where he was preparing dinner himself. Another surprise. "The penthouse and the mansion in the Hamptons are for impressing people. This is where I live." The domesticity of the scene was disorienting. Harrison Thorn, who until recently commanded a global corporate empire, was chopping vegetables in a kitchen that could belong to any upper-middle-class New Yorker. "How are you so calm?" Sophia asked, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Tomorrow, everything explodes. Your reputation, your company, your legacy, all of it changes forever." Harrison considered her question as he stirred something on the stove. "Because for the first time in decades, my actions and my values are fully aligned. It's clarifying." Over dinner, a surprisingly good risotto, they discussed the likely aftermath of the journal article. Harrison had gamed out every scenario: Richardson's denial, the board's damage control attempts, the initial stock plunge, the potential for criminal charges. "The most dangerous period will be the first 72 hours, he explained. "Richardson has powerful allies who will try to discredit the evidence and silence witnesses. Your team needs to stay together and visible. Public scrutiny is your best protection." "And you?" Sophia asked. "Where will you be when the storm hits?" "Exactly where I need to be." His cryptic answer was accompanied by a look that suggested he had moves planned that he wasn't sharing. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself studying Harrison with new eye. The man across from her was neither the cold corporate titan from Bellini's nor the penitent reformer of recent weeks. He was more complex than either caricature, flawed but evolving, privileged but now using that privilege to dismantle the very systems that had enriched him. "Why did you keep it?" she asked suddenly. "The napkin with my mother's name. You could have thrown it away. Forgotten our encounter, continued as before." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "Because in 25 years of building Thorn Industries, that was the first time someone had shown me the true human cost of my success. Not in a report or a presentation, but face to face, with nothing to gain and everything to lose." He met her gaze across the table. "You made my mother's words real again." The admission hung between them, shifting something fundamental in their relationship. They were no longer just reluctant allies in a corporate crusade. They had become something more complicated, two people bound by tragedy, redemption, and a growing trust neither had anticipated. "Tomorrow changes everything," Sophia said quietly. Harrison nodded, raising his glass in a solemn toast. "To burning it all down and building something better from the ashes," she added, completing the thought as their glasses clinked. Neither could have predicted just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Wall Street Journal headline hit at 5 a.m, "Digital First, Toxic Empire. Thorn Industries whistleblowers expose global environmental crimes." By 5:01 a.m, Sophia's phone was ringing. By 5:30 a.m, every news network in the country was running the story. By 6 a.m, Thorn Industries stock had dropped 20 points in pre-market trading. By 7 a.m, James Richardson had issued a statement calling the allegations malicious fabrications by disgruntled former employees and promising legal action against the journal and the whistleblowers. By 8 a.m, that statement was undermined by breaking news that federal agents were raiding Richardson's Manhattan penthouse and the homes of 3 Thorn Industries board members. The corporate earthquake Harrison had engineered was unfolding exactly as predicted. Sophia watched it all from the safety of the Brooklyn warehouse, surrounded by her team as they monitored the cascading revelation. The secure server in Zurich had activated overnight, releasing damning documentation to a dozen news outlets simultaneously, a carefully curated trail of evidence linking Richardson's shell companies to illegal dumping operations on 3 continents. "They just suspended trading of Thorn's stock," Alvarez announced, eyes fixed on his financial terminal. "The market can't handle the volatility." Chen looked up from her computer. "Environmental groups are mobilizing protests at Thorn facilities worldwide. We're getting solidarity statements from NGOs across the board." The warehouse door opened, and Harrison entered, looking remarkably composed for a man whose life's work was publicly imploding. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a deliberate departure from his corporate image. "Richardson is calling an emergency press conference for noon," he announced without preamble. "The board is meeting now to determine their response." "How bad will it get?" Sophia asked. "Worse before it gets better. Richardson won't go down without a fight." Harrison moved to a large screen displaying real-time news coverage. "The SEC has frozen his assets, but he still has allies throughout the industry. Expect character assassination, manufactured counter-evidence, possibly even physical intimidation." As if on cue, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Should have stayed a waitress. Not too late to walk away." She showed it to Harrison, whose expression hardened. "Security protocols activate now. No one travels alone. All communications through encrypted channels only." The team spent the morning preparing for Richardson's counterattack, organizing their evidence into airtight categories that could withstand legal scrutiny. At precisely noon, they gathered around the screens to watch Richardson's press conference. The interim CEO appeared flanked by Thorn Industries' general counsel and 2 stone-faced board members. Gone was the smooth corporate operator. In his place stood a man fighting for his freedom and reputation. "The allegations against me and this company are not only false, but represent a calculated attack orchestrated by Harrison Thorne himself, Richardson began, his voice tight with controlled fury. After years of mismanagement that threatened shareholder value, the board rightfully removed Mr. Thorne from leadership. Unable to accept this reality, he has fabricated an elaborate smear campaign. Richardson held up a folder. We have evidence that Mr. Thorne personally approved and concealed the very environmental violations he now condemns. His supposed conversion is nothing but a cynical attempt to rewrite history and avoid personal liability. Sophia glanced at Harrison, who watched impassively, showing no reaction to the accusation. As for Ms. Reyes, Richardson continued, this so-called environmental crusader is a college dropout with a personal vendetta against our company. Her mother's unfortunate illness, while tragic, has no scientific connection to our operations, a fact confirmed by multiple independent studies. The familiar corporate playbook: deny, discredit, deflect. Sophia had expected it, but the casual dismissal of her mother's death still stung. That we are cooperating fully with authorities while preparing legal action against these defamatory claims. Richardson concluded, Thorne Industries remains committed to responsible environmental stewardship within the realistic constraints of global business operations. As the press conference ended, Harrison turned to the team. They're scared. Richardson is playing his only card, trying to shift blame back to me. Will it work? Chen asked. Not for long, Harrison replied, checking his watch. In approximately 3 hours, the Malaysian government will announce criminal charges against Richardson personally for environmental crimes within their jurisdiction. They've been building their case quietly for weeks, parallel to our investigation. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You're doing? I simply made sure the right evidence reached the right officials. Harrison's expression was unapologetic. International charges complicate his defense considerably. Throughout the afternoon, the crisis intensified. Richardson's legal team obtained a temporary injunction against further publication of certain documents. 2 of Sophia's team members reported being followed. Thorne Industries' PR machine launched a coordinated attack on Harrison's character, releasing selectively edited emails suggesting he had known about environmental violations for years. By evening, the battle lines were clearly drawn. Financial news analyzed the potential collapse of the Thorne empire. Environmental activists celebrated the exposure of corporate malfeasance. Legal experts debated the whistleblower protections available to Sophia's team. Through it all, Harrison remained unnervingly calm, responding to each new development with strategic precision. It was as if he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. You knew it would come to this, didn't you? Sophia asked when they finally had a moment alone. Even before Malaysia, you were building toward this confrontation. Harrison considered her question. Not specifically this, but I've known for some time that the company had grown too large, too complex to reform incrementally. He gazed out the warehouse window at the Brooklyn skyline. Sometimes you have to tear down what you've built to see what it should have been all along. His phone chimed with a notification. The board has called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. Richardson is pushing for a vote of confidence. Can he win? Ordinarily, yes. The institutional investors typically back management in these situations. Harrison's expression shifted to something like satisfaction. But I've spent the past month convincing major shareholders to withhold support pending a full investigation. And your shares? Sophia asked. I've transferred voting control of my 43% stake to a blind trust with explicit governance requirements. He handed her a legal document. The trustee can only vote those shares according to strict environmental and ethical guidelines. Sophia scanned the document, her eyes widening when she reached the trustee's name. This is me. You've made me the trustee. Who better? Harrison said simply. D. You have no conflicts of interest, no financial stake in maintaining the status quo. You'll vote those shares based on principle, not profit. The magnitude of what he'd done struck her. Harrison Thorne, who had spent decades accumulating power and control, had voluntarily relinquished his authority over his greatest asset, placing it instead in the hands of a former waitress who had confronted him with his failures. Richardson will fight this arrangement in court, she pointed out. Let him. The trust is ironclad, established before any investigations became public. By the time the legal challenges conclude, the company will already be transformed. As night fell over New York, Sophia's team dispersed to safe locations, preparing for the shareholder showdown the next day. Harrison prepared to leave as well, pausing at the door. "And do whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "remember that we've already won the most important battle. The truth is out. The change has begun." Sophia nodded, exhausted but resolute. "I'll see you at the shareholder meeting." "Actually," Harrison replied, "you won't. I won't be there." "What? Why not?" "Because tomorrow isn't about me anymore." His gaze held hers steadily. "It's about the future you're going to build from what remains." With those enigmatic words, he was gone, leaving Sophia to wonder what final move Harrison Thorne had planned in the game that had consumed both their lives. The Thorne Industries shareholder meeting convened in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, a fitting venue for what financial analysts were already calling the corporate showdown of the decade. Sophia arrived flanked by Dr. Chen and Alvarez, their entrance causing a ripple of whispers through the assembled shareholders, executives, and media. Richardson stood at the podium, projecting confidence despite the Malaysian government's announcement of criminal charges just hours earlier. 3 empty chairs on the stage marked the absence of board members currently being questioned by federal authorities. "Where's Harrison?" Chen whispered, as they took their seats in the front row. "He said he wouldn't be here," Sophia replied, scanning the room. "That this isn't about him anymore." The proceedings began with Richardson attempting to control the narrative, acknowledging unfortunate environmental incidents while characterizing Harrison's whistleblowing as a vindictive campaign by a founder unable to accept necessary corporate evolution. He proposed a resolution affirming confidence in current management and authorizing aggressive legal action against the defamatory claims damaging the company's reputation. When the time came for shareholder questions, Sophia approached the microphone. "Ms. Sophia Reyes," she introduced herself, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. "Trustee of the Phoenix Trust, controlling 43% of voting shares." Richardson's composure faltered visibly. "We're challenging that arrangement." "Your challenge will take months to resolve," Sophia interrupted. "Now today, I am the legal trustee, and I have questions about your management of Thorne Industries' environmental liabilities." For 30 minutes, she methodically dismantled Richardson's defense with precise questions about specific violations, shell companies, and falsified reports. Each question was accompanied by documentation displayed on the ballroom screens, evidence so thorough that several institutional investors began whispering urgently to their advisors. "Finally, Mr. Richardson," Sophia concluded, "I'd like to address your claim that Harrison Thorne orchestrated these allegations to avoid his own liability. If that were true, why would he transfer control of his voting shares to the very person who first confronted him about his company's environmental crimes?" Before Richardson could respond, the ballroom doors opened. A murmur spread through the crowd as Harrison Thorne entered, not in his customary tailored suit, but dressed simply in slacks and a button-down shirt, as if he were any ordinary shareholder. Without a word, he took a seat in the back row. Richardson recovered quickly. "Mr. Thorne's theatrical gestures don't change the facts. This company has thrived under proper management, focused on shareholder value rather than personal vendettas. I call for an immediate vote," Sophia announced, cutting him off. "The Phoenix Trust proposes the following: removal of the current interim CEO and implicated board members, establishment of an independent environmental oversight committee with binding authority, and commitment of 30% of annual profits for the next decade to remediation and victim compensation." What followed was corporate democracy at its most dramatic. Major institutional investors, sensing the tide turning, aligned with the Phoenix Trust. By afternoon's end, Richardson had been removed, a provisional board appointed, and Sophia's environmental proposals adopted by a decisive margin. As shareholders dispersed, reporters swarmed Sophia, hungry for quotes from the waitress who had engineered the downfall of a corporate titan. Through the chaos, she spotted Harrison quietly slipping out a side door. She excused herself and followed. She found him in a small courtyard garden behind the hotel, sitting alone on a bench, watching the late afternoon sunlight filter through the trees. "You knew exactly how this would play out," she said, taking a seat beside him. "I hoped," he corrected. "The variables were numerous, yet you planned for all of them." She studied his profile, trying to reconcile this contemplative man with the imperious CEO she'd first encountered. "Why didn't you tell me about transferring your shares sooner?" "Because I needed you to make your own decisions, free from obligation to me." He turned to face her. "Your moral compass was always truer than mine, Sophia. It needed to remain uncorrupted." The simple acknowledgement touched her deeply. "What happens now? That's largely up to you. The provisional board will need guidance rebuilding the company. The trust gives you significant influence. And you, where do you go from here?" Harrison looked out over the garden. "I've established a foundation focused on environmental remediation in communities like Millfield. There's a lifetime of damage to undo." Sophia absorbed this. "You're walking away from Thorn Industries completely." "Not walking away. Evolving my relationship with it." His eyes met hers. "Some legacies need to be reimagined, not merely continued." As the garden fell silent around them, Sophia was struck by how far they had both traveled from that night at Bellini's. She, from a waitress burning with righteous anger, to a corporate power broker transforming an industry from within. He, from a disconnected billionaire, to a man reconnecting with his original purpose. "I have something for you," Harrison said. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small glass frame and handed it to her. Inside was the napkin with her mother's name, the simple act of truth-telling that had catalyzed everything. "I thought you should have this back," he said quietly. "Your mother's legacy belongs with you." Sophia traced her finger over the glass, remembering the impulse that had driven her to write those words, never imagining where they would lead. "Keep it," she said, returning the frame. "I put it somewhere you'll see it every day. A reminder of what I've done wrong, of what you're doing right." As the sun began to set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the garden, they sat in companionable silence, two unlikely allies who had dismantled an empire to build something more meaningful from its foundations. "My mother used to say that healing doesn't mean the damage never existed," Sophia reflected. "It means the damage no longer controls your life." Harrison nodded, understanding the dual meaning. "Wise woman. She would have been 62 today," Sophia said softly. "I used to imagine what I'd say to the people responsible for what happened to her. All the accusations I'd hurl, all the justice I'd demand. And now I realize that changing the system that failed her matters more than punishing any individual within it." She turned to him. "Even you." Harrison absorbed this grace with quiet humility. "There's a board meeting tomorrow morning. The provisional directors will be looking for direction. Will you be there?" "No. But I'll be working in Millfield, installing water filtration systems alongside the remediation team." A small smile touched his lips. "I've discovered I prefer actions to meetings these days." Sophia laughed softly. "Harrison Thorn, billionaire plumber." "Former billionaire," he corrected. "The foundation and settlement funds required liquidating most of my assets." The revelation stunned her. "Or you gave up your fortune?" "I redirected it," he clarified. "Money is just a tool, Sophia. For too long, I measured success by its accumulation rather than its application." As evening descended, they walked together out of the garden and onto the bustling New York street. A taxi pulled up, and Harrison opened the door for her. "The new board will need a CEO who understands both environmental science and corporate accountability," he said. "And someone uncompromising yet practical. Someone who knows the cost of failure and the value of redemption." Sophia understood what he was suggesting. "I've never run anything larger than a Waitress station. You just orchestrated the most significant corporate restructuring in decades," he countered. "Besides, 6 months ago, I'd never installed a water filter." They shared a smile at the symmetry of their transformations. "One napkin," Sophia mused, shaking her head at the improbability of their journey. "One truth," Harrison amended, powerful enough to change everything. As they parted ways, he to continue his hands-on atonement, she to prepare for rebuilding what they had deconstructed together, Sophia realized that their story had never really been about environmental compliance or corporate governance. It had been about two people finding their authentic purpose through an unlikely connection: a grieving daughter with the courage to speak truth to power, and a powerful man with the humility to listen. In the end, a single handwritten name on a restaurant napkin had accomplished what decades of regulations, lawsuits, and activism could not. It had reached the human being behind the corporate mask and awakened a dormant conscience. The napkin itself was just paper, destined to fade and crumble with time, but the message it carried would endure in the transformed lives of communities once poisoned by indifference and now healing through deliberate care. And perhaps that was the most powerful legacy of all.